All right, everyone. So today for the Monday is assignment. Now that you've watched the video in the previous section and answered the questions, we're just going to do a little review and recap our investigation question. So we've been exploring why do different substances have different properties. And we've been looking at this on the atomic scale, right? So we've been looking at these substances' atoms. So we want to remember that our two key terms here. We have atom, which are these tiny pieces that all matter is made up of. So it's that the smallest unit of matter. And then we have these atoms that create molecules. So we got molecules, and these are groups of atoms. So when you guys were looking at those groups in our atomic models, those are referred to as molecules. So this is the way a group of atoms are joined in a particular way. So we have our individual atoms that join together to form molecules. And like I was saying before, we've been looking at a lot of models throughout this entire year. We have our atomic models now, but we've been looking at models when we studied plate tectonics. We've been looking at models when we were studying ecosystems. And then we also were looking at models for phase changes. So these models are objects, diagrams, or computer simulations that we've been using to help us understand something by making it simpler or easier to see. So it's kind of like blowing it up and zooming in on scientific topics. And then we have properties. So remember, properties are these observable things about substances. So, what are some identifying characteristics? You guys have called out the way they smell, the way they feel, the way they look. So, like the color, or maybe if they're clear. Um, so those are just some examples of properties, right? And we've also been touching on boiling and melting points. So at what points or what temperature rather do these substances melt, or at what point do they boil? That's also an identifying property. And another thing that term that's been coming up as well too is substance. So, because when we think of substance, we think of like some just anything, but a substance is really something that is made up of the same atom. So, a substance is different than a mixture, because a substance is made up of the same atoms or groups of atoms. So, they'll have identical molecules or identical atoms. And then, whereas solutions or mixtures, these are a mix of two or more substances. So you'll have different types of molecules and atoms floating around in a solution. So those will have different types of atoms and molecules in a solution or a mixture. So those are the big key differences. And another thing that I wanted to mention, so you guys, we've already gone over the molecules. So those are groups of atoms, right? So we can have a water molecule. So a water molecule is made up of one oxygen, represented by O here, and then two hydrogens, so represented by those two H's. And that creates a water molecule. And then you might have repeating water molecules to create a substance and eventually even fill a glass of water. So a glass of water is going to have millions and millions and millions of water molecules. And then you have something called extended structures. So when they refer to extended structures, these again are just repeating atoms or groups of atoms. So we have these same repeating groups of atoms that create substances. So we have one NaCl, and because it's repeating the same pattern, it creates salt. So NaCl is sodium chloride, which creates salt. That's its general term. And then we have Au. Au represents gold. So we have all these individual gold atoms are repeating and eventually create what you see as gold. So these repeating atoms, right? They'll repeat the same atoms and create a substance. that you see eventually that's called gold. So, what we see to the human eye, that's billions and billions of atoms repeating to create a substance. And then we have our repeating groups of atoms, like I mentioned. And these repeat over and over again and create our substances such as salt or water. And because different substances might have different patterns of atoms or different repeating groups of atoms, that's what makes them different. That's what makes oil and water so different. Water has different molecules and repeating molecules than oil does. So those are what's going to make these substances different, right? Oil and water are two things um, that are pretty common household items that are very different. So as we think about answering our investigation question, I'll delete this part here. So we're going to create, or you will rather, create 2 to 3 sentences using the terms in the word bank below. I defined these terms on the previous slides for you, and you can also use those definitions to refer back to. And the link to this presentation is right above the video. So you can click the link and access this presentation to look at it. So just to give you an example, so we're going to be answering this question, why do different substances have different properties? That's the big question here. Oops, didn't mean to make that. Why do these different substances have different properties? So an example of one sentence that you could create using 2 words is we use models to analyze atoms of substances. So we definitely use models, and then you would create another sentence. You can still reuse words. So you can reuse the same words, but the point is that you want to use these terms to answer the question because this will help you answer the question clearly while using specific academic vocabulary. So you want to be able to answer the question clearly and concisely. Let me know if you have any questions. So you can go to the Google form and you'll create your couple sentences in the Google form and use this presentation to answer the following few questions after this video.